boss didn't know I just got headhunted for triple my salary when he said, "You're lucky we keep you around. Nobody else would hire someone so mediocre." The conference room went silent. I was holding my phone under the table, still warm from the email I'd received 18 minutes earlier. Subject line, formal offer, VP of Engineering, Nexus Technologies. Base salary, $340,000. Equity package worth approximately $2.1 million over 4 years. Full benefits. Signing bonus, $75,000. Start date, at my convenience. My current salary at TechCore Solutions was $98,000, and I'd been fighting for a raise to $105,000 for 14 months. Michael Drucker stood at the head of the table, his arms crossed over his expensive suit, looking at me like I was something he'd found stuck to his shoe. Around us, 8 other engineers stared at their laptops, pretending they hadn't just heard him publicly humiliate me during our quarterly performance review. My hands were steady as I set my phone face down on the table. That surprised me. I looked at Michael, at his perfectly styled silver hair and his condescending smirk, and I smiled back. "You're absolutely right," I said. "I am lucky." The relief that flashed across his face was almost worth the past 3 years of hell. I'd been working at TechCore Solutions for 5 years when everything started unraveling. The company was a mid-sized software development firm in Austin, servicing enterprise clients who needed custom applications and infrastructure solutions. I was hired in 2018 as a junior software engineer, fresh out of my computer science degree from UT Austin, with strong skills in back-end development and cloud architecture. The job paid $68,000, which felt incredible after years of eating ramen and debugging code in my dorm room at 3 in the morning. Michael Drucker was the VP of Engineering, 49 years old, former Google employee who'd left after 8 years to join TechCore in 2015. He was charismatic in client demos, brilliant at architecture discussions, and absolutely poisonous to work under. But I didn't discover that until much later. In my initial interview, he'd been enthusiastic, asking smart questions about my senior project and nodding approvingly when I explained my approach to microservices design. "We need fresh talent like you," he said, shaking my hand firmly. "Someone who understands modern development practices and isn't stuck in legacy thinking. You're going to fit right in here." For the first 2 years, I thrived. I rebuilt the authentication system for our largest client, a healthcare provider with 8 million users, reducing login failures by 92% and cutting infrastructure costs by 35%. I architected a real-time data processing pipeline for a financial services company that could handle 50,000 transactions per second with sub-100 millisecond latency. I mentored 3 junior developers who all got promoted within 18 months of working with me. My performance reviews were outstanding. Michael called me exceptional and leadership material. He nominated me for the company's Innovation Award in 2019, which I won. The award came with a $5,000 bonus and a profile in TechCore's quarterly newsletter. Then, in early 2020, something shifted. I'd been invited to speak on a panel at a major tech conference in San Francisco about cloud architecture best practices. It was a significant opportunity, featuring speakers from Amazon, Microsoft, and Netflix. Michael had initially approved my attendance, saying it would be great exposure for TechCore. I'd spent weeks preparing, making sure I could represent the company well while sharing genuinely useful technical insights. The panel went better than I'd hoped. The room was packed with over 600 engineers and architects. My contributions sparked a lively discussion about scalability challenges, and afterward, dozens of people approached me with questions and business cards. 5 different companies, including 2 major tech firms, mentioned they were hiring and suggested I apply. When I returned to Austin, Michael called me into his office. I'd expected congratulations, maybe even a conversation about the networking opportunities. Instead, he was cold. "I saw the video of your panel," he said, eyes fixed on his monitor instead of me. "You talked a lot about your personal projects, not enough about TechCore's work." I'd been confused. "I talked about the healthcare authentication system and the financial services pipeline. Those are TechCore projects. You talked about them like they were your projects," he said, finally looking at me. His expression was hostile, using a lot of "I did this" and "I built that." "That's not how we represent the company externally. We're a team. You made it sound like you're a one-man show." I felt my stomach drop. "I'm sorry if it came across that way. I was just trying to be specific about my technical contributions when answering questions." "Well, it came across as self-aggrandizing," Michael had said flatly. "Going forward, all external speaking needs to be approved by me in writing at least 90 days in advance, and I'll need to review your talking points before any presentation. We can't have you out there positioning yourself as some kind of solo genius when you're really just executing the team's vision." I'd left his office feeling like I'd been slapped. Over the following months, the criticism intensified. Work that had previously earned praise was now found lacking. The healthcare authentication system had a bug that affected 0.03% of users under specific edge case conditions. Michael called it sloppy engineering at a team meeting. Never mind that a 99.97% success rate was exceptional. The financial services pipeline had slightly higher latency during peak loads than my initial estimates. Michael said I'd overpromised and underdelivered, ignoring the fact that the system still exceeded the client's requirements by a significant margin. He started excluding me from architecture discussions I'd normally lead, saying he wanted to give other engineers opportunities to step up. He stopped assigning me to high-visibility projects. My workload shifted from innovative systems design to maintenance work and bug fixes. The message was clear. I was being slowly sidelined. My colleague Jason, who'd been hired around the same time as me, pulled me aside in the break room one afternoon in June 2020. "What's going on between you and Michael?" he asked quietly. "He's been really harsh on you lately, not like before." "I don't know," I'd admitted. "Ever since the San Francisco conference, he's been different. It's like everything I do annoys him." Jason had glanced toward Michael's office. "You know he does this, right? When someone on the team gets too much external recognition, he can't handle anyone getting attention that doesn't flow through him. He did it to Priya before she left." Priya Kapoor had been a senior engineer who quit abruptly 8 months before I was hired. I'd heard vague rumors about conflicts with management, but never got details. "What happened with Priya?" I'd ask. "She published a technical paper that got accepted to a major conference, got invited to give talks, got mentioned in some tech blogs." Michael smiled to her face and then systematically made her life miserable. Started questioning her technical decisions, excluded her from important projects, spread rumors that she was difficult to work with. She lasted 6 more months and then went to Facebook. She's a principal engineer there now, making probably 3 times what we make. The pattern was suddenly, horrifyingly clear. Michael Drucker built his reputation on the work of talented engineers, but he couldn't tolerate them receiving direct recognition. And now, I was his target. The real breaking point came in October 2020. I'd been working on a project for a major e-commerce client, building a recommendation engine that used machine learning to personalize product suggestions. It was complex work, requiring deep knowledge of both distributed systems and ML algorithms. I'd put in 4 months of intensive effort, including nights and weekends, and the final system had increased the client's conversion rate by 41% and average order value by 28%. The client was thrilled. I'd submitted my final technical documentation to Michael for review before the client presentation. He called me into his office the next morning, my printed report covered in red ink. "This is completely inadequate," he'd said, sliding it across his desk at me. "The architecture is overcomplicated, the code documentation is sparse, and the performance claims are exaggerated." I'd stared at the report, at the red marks that seemed to cover every page. "Michael, I can walk you through the architecture. Every design decision is justified in the documentation. The performance metrics are all validated against production data. I don't need you to walk me through it," he'd snapped. "I need you to do it right the first time. Rebuild this entire system with a simpler architecture, and I want it done in 3 weeks." 3 weeks was insane. The original development had taken 4 months. Rebuilding from scratch with a different approach would require redesigning the entire data pipeline and ML model. "That timeline isn't realistic for a complete rebuild," I'd said carefully. "If you have specific concerns about the current approach, I can address those, but starting over in 3 weeks..." "Then maybe you're not as capable as I thought," Michael had interrupted. "Maybe I overestimated your abilities. Maybe you need to go back to junior level work and let the senior engineers handle the complex projects." I felt my face flush hot. "I am a senior engineer. This system is solid. If you have technical concerns, let's discuss them specifically. But dismissing the entire project because you want a different approach isn't reasonable." "What's not reasonable?" Michael had said, his voice dropping to that quiet, dangerous tone, "is you questioning my technical judgment. I've been doing this for 20 years. I was writing distributed systems before you graduated high school. You're a mid-level developer who got lucky on a few projects. Don't mistake luck for skill." I'd left his office with the marked-up documentation and an impossible deadline. I'd gone home that night and seriously considered quitting, but I had student loans, rent, car payments. I couldn't just walk away without something else lined up. So I'd done what I always did. I'd started working on the rebuild, because what other choice did I have? I worked 18-hour days for 3 weeks straight. I barely slept, lived on coffee and takeout, ignored calls from my girlfriend who was getting increasingly worried about my stress levels. I built 2 different alternative architectures, load tested them both, documented everything with exhaustive detail. On the day of the deadline, I submitted a complete system redesign with comprehensive documentation and benchmark results showing it actually performed slightly better than the original. Michael took 4 days to review it, then called me into his office again. "This is acceptable," he'd said, which was the closest thing to praise I'd gotten in months. "I'm going to present this to the client next week. You can attend the meeting." The client presentation was the following Thursday. I'd spent hours preparing, anticipating technical questions, making sure I could defend every architectural decision. But when we got into the conference room with the client's engineering team, Michael did all the talking. Every time I tried to contribute, he'd talk over me or dismiss my input. He presented the system as if he'd architected it himself, using phrases like "my design approach" and "what I decided to implement," when describing work I'd done entirely alone. The client's CTO, a guy named Leonard Park with 15 years of experience at various startups, looked increasingly uncomfortable. Finally, he interrupted Michael mid-sentence. "Sorry, but I'd really like to hear from the engineer who actually built this." "You," he pointed at me. "What's your name?" "Alex," I'd said. "Alex Reeves." "Alex, Can you walk me through the ML model architecture? I want to understand the feature selection process. I'd explained the model design, answered Leonard's detailed technical questions, discussed the trade-offs between different algorithmic approaches. He'd been impressed. I could tell from the way he was nodding and asking increasingly specific follow-up questions. He'd asked for my direct email to continue the technical discussion after the meeting. After we'd left the client's office, in the car back to TechCore, Michael had been silent for 15 minutes. Then he'd said, without looking at me, "In the future, let me handle the client communication. You tend to get too technical. It confuses non-technical stakeholders." Leonard Park is a CTO, I pointed out. He specifically asked for technical details. "And you overwhelmed him with unnecessary complexity," Michael had snapped. "This is why I handle client relationships and you write code. Stay in your lane, Alex." I'd realized then that nothing I did would ever be good enough. Michael didn't want me to succeed. He wanted me to fail quietly, or better yet, to leave. The question was what I was going to do about it. The answer came from an unexpected source 2 months later when I received a LinkedIn message from a recruiter named Diana Chen. Wait, can't use Chen. Let me revise. The answer came from an unexpected source 2 months later when I received a LinkedIn message from a recruiter named Diana Blackwell, who worked for an executive search firm called Summit Partners. "Hi, Alex," the message read. "I've been following your technical contributions, particularly your work on distributed systems and ML infrastructure. I'm working with a client looking for someone with exactly your expertise to lead their engineering organization. Would you be open to a confidential conversation?" I'd almost deleted it. I got recruiter spam occasionally, usually for positions that weren't relevant or companies I'd never heard of. But something made me look at Diana's profile. She was a senior partner at Summit, specialized in placing VP and C-level technical talent at high-growth startups, had 19 years of experience. This wasn't random spam. I'd responded, "I'm open to learning more. What company?" Her reply came within 2 hours. "Nexus Technologies, Series D startup, $340 million in funding, building next-generation cloud infrastructure. They need a VP of engineering to scale the team from 20 to 200 over the next 18 months. Based on your background, you'd be perfect. Can we talk Friday at 2 p.m.? I'd known about Nexus Technologies. They'd been in tech news recently for a major funding round led by Andreessen Horowitz. They were building cutting-edge distributed systems that competed directly with AWS and Google Cloud. A VP of engineering role there would be a massive leap from my current position. I'd agreed to the call. The conversation with Diana was eye-opening. She'd done deep research, knew about my healthcare authentication system, my financial services pipeline, my conference presentations. "I've talked to people in the industry who've worked with you or heard you speak," she'd said. "Everyone says the same thing. You're exceptionally talented, you deliver results, and you're not getting the recognition you deserve. Nexus is looking for someone who can build and lead a world-class engineering organization. From everything I've seen, you're not just qualified. You're exactly what they need." "How much do you know about my current situation?" I'd asked carefully. "I know you're at TechCore Solutions. I know Michael Drucker has a reputation in the Austin tech community for being a toxic manager who burns through talented engineers. I know Priya Kapoor left and went to Facebook. I know you're probably making somewhere around 90 to 100,000 and wondering if it's time to move on." She'd nailed my salary within $2,000. It was unsettling and validating simultaneously. "What's the role paying?" I'd asked. "Base salary range is $320,000 to $360,000 depending on experience, plus an equity package currently valued around $2 million over 4 years with your strike price. You'd report directly to the CEO, have full autonomy over technical decisions and team building, and equity that could be worth significantly more if Nexus hits their growth targets. We're talking about a company that could IPO in 3 years." I'd tried to keep my voice steady. That's a significant increase from what I'm making now." "It's what you're worth," Diana had said simply. "You've been dramatically underpaid and undervalued. Nexus recognizes that. They want to move fast on this. Would you be willing to meet with the CEO next week?" I'd met with Nexus's CEO, a guy named Marcus. Wait, can't use Marcus. I'd met with Nexus's CEO, a guy named Connor Westfield, the following Wednesday. He was 38, previously CTO, at a company that had been acquired by Oracle for $1.2 billion. Exactly the kind of technical leader who understood what good engineering looked like. We'd talked for 3 hours about architecture philosophy, team culture, scaling challenges, and vision for the future. He'd been honest about the challenges: aggressive growth targets, competitive pressure, the chaos of a high-growth startup. But he'd also been clear about the opportunity. "I need someone who can build an engineering organization that can scale without breaking," Connor had said. "Someone who can architect systems that handle exponential growth, mentor engineers, make hard technical decisions, and represent the company to clients and investors. Diana showed me your work. You can do all of that. The question is whether you want to." I'd wanted to. God, I'd wanted to. But I'd also been terrified. Leaving a stable job, even a toxic one for a startup, was risky. What if I failed? What if I wasn't ready for VP-level responsibility? Connor must have seen my hesitation. "Let me make this easy," he'd said. We'll give you a 75,000 signing bonus that you keep even if things don't work out. We'll give you a severance package that guarantees 6 months' salary if we part ways in the first year. You'll have resources, autonomy, and a team that actually wants to be here. What's the worst that happens? You try it for 6 months, and if it's not right, you leave with money in the bank and VP-level experience on your resume. The second interview was with Nexus's board the following week. 5 people, including Connor and 3 of their major investors. They'd grilled me on technical architecture, team management, scaling strategies. I'd answered every question, demonstrated my thinking, showed them I could operate at their level. One of the investors, a woman named Rebecca Liu, who was a general partner at Sequoia, had been particularly intense. "What's your biggest weakness as a leader?" she'd asked. "I tend to focus too much on the technical details and not enough on the business context," I'd answered honestly. "I can get so deep into solving an engineering problem that I lose sight of whether it's actually the right problem to solve. I'm working on balancing technical excellence with business value." Rebecca had nodded approvingly. "That's a good self-assessment. How do you plan to improve?" "By surrounding myself with people who think differently. Product managers who push back on technical solutions that don't serve users. Business leaders who keep me focused on revenue and growth. I don't want to be the smartest person in the room. I want to be the person who builds a room full of people smarter than me." Connor had smiled at that answer. 2 days later, Diana had called with the formal offer. $340,000 base. Equity package worth approximately $2.1 million at current valuation. $75,000 signing bonus. Full benefits including healthcare, 401k matching, unlimited PTO. Start date flexible. "They want you to start as soon as possible," Diana said, "but they'll wait up to 60 days if you need to give notice and transition properly." I'd been sitting in my car outside TechCore when I got that call. I'd looked up at the office building, at the windows where I'd spent 5 years of my life, and I'd felt nothing. No sadness, no nostalgia, just relief. "I'll need to give 2 weeks' notice," I told Diana. "Can I have 24 hours to review the offer letter before signing?" "Of course. I'm sending it to your personal email now." That night, I'd read the offer letter 3 times. Then I'd called my girlfriend, Amy, and told her everything. She'd been quiet for a long moment after I finished. "Alex, that's incredible," she'd finally said. "That's life-changing money. But are you sure? That's a huge jump in responsibility." "I'm terrified," I'd admitted. "But I'm more terrified of spending another year being told I'm not good enough by someone who's threatened by me. Even if I fail at Nexus, at least I'll fail trying something meaningful." "You're not going to fail," Amy had said with certainty. "You're brilliant, and you work harder than anyone I know. Michael just can't stand that you're more talented than he is." I'd signed the offer letter that night at 11:47 p.m. Diana had confirmed receipt within minutes. "Congratulations," her email said. "Welcome to Nexus. I'll coordinate with their HR team to finalize your start date. When are you planning to give notice?" "Monday morning," I'd responded. That had been the plan. Give notice Monday, work out 2 weeks, start at Nexus in early March. Clean, professional, dignified. Then, Monday morning happened. The quarterly performance review meeting started at 9 a.m. All engineers were required to attend. Michael had prepared a presentation reviewing Q4 2020 performance, including individual highlights and areas for improvement. I'd sat in my usual seat, 3rd row from the front, watching Michael click through slides about revenue growth and client satisfaction metrics. Then, he'd gotten to the individual performance section. He'd started with praise for several engineers, highlighting successful projects and promotions. Jason got praised for a mobile app redesign. Another engineer named Kevin got recognized for improving database query performance. Then Michael had gotten to my slide. "Alex Reeves," he'd said, and I'd immediately noticed his tone was different. Colder. Alex has been with us for 5 years, working primarily on back-end systems and client projects. He'd clicked to the next slide, which showed a list of my projects from the past year. While Alex has contributed to several important initiatives, his performance this year has been inconsistent. My stomach had dropped. Around me, other engineers had shifted uncomfortably. The recommendation engine project, while ultimately successful, required significant overtime and missed multiple interim deadlines. The initial architecture had to be completely rebuilt due to fundamental design flaws. That was a lie. The architecture had been solid. Michael had demanded a rebuild because he wanted control. Additionally, Alex has shown a tendency towards self-promotion that doesn't align with our team-first culture. External speaking engagements where he positioned his work as individual achievements rather than team efforts. It's concerning behavior for someone at his level. I'd felt my face burning. Other engineers were looking at me with a mixture of pity and embarrassment. Michael had continued, his voice taking on that condescending tone I'd come to hate. "Now, I want to be clear. We're not letting Alex go. Despite these performance issues, we value his technical skills. He's a decent coder when he stays focused on the work and doesn't get distracted by personal brand building." He'd looked directly at me then, and I'd seen something in his eyes. Satisfaction. He was enjoying this. "But Alex, you need to understand something. You're lucky we keep you around. Nobody else would hire someone so mediocre. The sooner you accept that you're a mid-level contributor and not the genius you seem to think you are, the better off you'll be. The room was absolutely silent. I'd felt my phone buzz in my pocket at that exact moment. A calendar notification. Nexus Technologies, offer signed, start date, March 15th. I'd pulled my phone out, looked at the notification, and something had clicked into place. All the anger, the frustration, the self-doubt Michael had been cultivating for months, it had evaporated. I'd looked up at Michael, at his smug face, and I'd smiled. That had confused him. His expression had faltered for just a second. "You're absolutely right," I'd said clearly, so everyone could hear. "I am lucky." Michael had looked relieved, like he'd expected me to argue. "Good. I'm glad you're being realistic about your situation." "I'm lucky," I'd continued, standing up so I could look him in the eye, "that I just signed an offer to be VP of Engineering at Nexus Technologies. Base salary $340,000. Equity package worth about $2 million. Start date is March 15th, so I'm giving my 2 weeks notice right now, effective immediately." The room had erupted. Engineers were turning to look at me with wide eyes. Jason had literally said, "Holy shit," out loud. Michael's face had gone from smug to pale to red in about 3 seconds. "You're... what?" he'd stammered. "I'm resigning," I'd said. "Thank you for the performance review. It really clarified some things for me. Mainly that you've been systematically undermining me because you can't handle anyone on your team getting recognition that doesn't flow through you. But that's not my problem anymore." "You can't," Michael had started. "I can, and I am. I'll email HR my formal resignation as soon as this meeting is over. I'll spend the next 2 weeks documenting my current projects and transitioning them to whoever you assign. Then I'm gone." I'd walked out of the conference room, leaving Michael standing at the front looking like he'd been punched in the stomach. I'd gone straight to my desk, opened my email, and sent a formal resignation to HR with Michael and the CEO, David Granger, CC'd. "Dear TechCore leadership," I'd written. "I am resigning from my position as Senior Software Engineer, effective March 12, 2021. My last day will be March 26th. I will ensure proper documentation and transition of all current projects. Thank you for the opportunities over the past 5 years. Regards, Alex Reeves." I'd hit send at 9:34 a.m. My desk phone had started ringing within minutes. The first call was from HR, a woman named Jennifer Holbrook, who'd been with TechCore for 12 years. "Alex, I just saw your resignation. Can we talk about this? I know the performance review was difficult, but..." "Jennifer, I've already accepted another position," I'd said calmly. "This isn't a negotiation. I'm giving proper notice and I'll complete a professional transition, but I'm done here." "Can I ask where you're going?" she'd asked. "Nexus Technologies, VP of Engineering." There was a long pause. That's a significant move up. Congratulations. I'm sorry things didn't work out here." "Thank you, Jennifer." The next call was from David Granger, the CEO. He'd been more direct. "Alex, Michael just told me you're leaving. He seems to think this is about the performance review." "It's about 3 years of systematic undermining," I'd said. "The review was just the final straw. Michael has been making my life miserable since I got external recognition that didn't benefit him directly. I'm sure if you talk to other engineers, you'll find I'm not the first talented person who's left because of him." David had been quiet for a moment. "That's a serious allegation." "It's a documented pattern. Ask Priya Kapoor why she left. Check the retention rate for senior engineers under Michael's management versus other departments. Look at the Glassdoor reviews that mention his name specifically. The data is all there if you care to look." "What would it take to keep you?" David had asked. "Nothing," I'd said honestly. "I've signed a contract with Nexus. I'm starting March 15th. Even if you match their offer, which you can't, I wouldn't stay. Michael has created a toxic environment, and you've either ignored it or enabled it. Either way, I'm done." I'd hung up and gotten back to work. I had projects to document, code to comment, transitions to plan. I was going to leave TechCore professionally, with my reputation intact and my work properly handed off. Michael could burn his own bridges. By lunchtime, word had spread through the entire engineering department. Engineers I barely knew were stopping by my desk to ask if it was true. Some congratulated me quietly, others asked if Nexus was hiring. One engineer, a junior developer named Sophie, who I'd mentored, had actually started crying. "I can't believe you're leaving," she'd said. "You're the only person here who actually helps me learn, instead of making me feel stupid for asking questions." "Michael makes everyone feel stupid," I'd said. "It's how he maintains control. You're not stupid, Sophie. You're talented, and you're going to do great things. Just don't let him convince you otherwise." Over the next 2 weeks, something interesting happened. Engineers started coming to me privately, asking about Nexus, about how I'd found the opportunity, about working with recruiters. I'd shared Diana Blackwell's contact information with at least 5 people. 3 of them ended up interviewing with companies she represented. Meanwhile, Michael had gone from actively hostile to conspicuously absent. He'd stopped attending stand-up meetings when I was there. He'd assigned Jason to work with me on transitions instead of overseeing them himself. He'd clearly complained to someone, though, because on my second to last day, I'd gotten called into a meeting with David Granger and Jennifer Holbrook from HR. Alex, we need to discuss some concerns Michael has raised about your conduct during your notice period, Jennifer had said. She'd looked uncomfortable. Michael says you've been encouraging other engineers to leave, actively recruiting them to competitors. That's false, I'd said. I've shared a recruiter's contact information when people have asked me directly how I found my new position. I haven't encouraged anyone to leave or recruited anyone to enter. David had pulled out a printed email. Michael also claims you've been bad-mouthing him to other employees, creating a hostile work environment during your final 2 weeks. I'd laughed. Actually laughed. David, I've been documenting my code and writing transition documents. I've barely talked to anyone except about work handoffs. If anyone's creating a hostile environment, it's Michael. He's the one who called me mediocre in front of the entire engineering team. That's textbook workplace harassment. Jennifer had winced. Alex, I want to be clear. We're not disputing that the performance review was handled poorly, but we need to make sure the remaining week is professional on both sides. Jennifer, I've been nothing but professional, I'd said. I've completed detailed documentation for all my projects. I've made myself available for questions. I've treated everyone with respect. If Michael is uncomfortable with engineers asking me questions about my job search, that's his problem, not mine. He doesn't get to humiliate me publicly and then complain when people notice I found something better. David had sighed. Fair enough. For what it's worth, Alex, you've been a valuable employee. I'm sorry it ended this way. Are you sorry enough to address Michael's management issues? I'd asked. Or will the next talented engineer who works under him end up leaving the same way I am and the same way Priya did? Neither of them had answered that question. My last day was a Friday. I'd arrived at 8 a.m., finished my final documentation, sent my transition summary to Jason and the team, and packed up my desk. 5 years of work fit into a single cardboard box. A few personal items, some books, a coffee mug I'd gotten at a conference. I'd walked out at 4:30 p.m. without saying goodbye to Michael. He wasn't at his desk anyway. I'd shaken hands with the engineers I'd worked closely with, exchanged contact information, promised to stay in touch. Sophie had hugged me and made me promise to let her know if Nexus ever needed junior developers. You're going to do great things, I told her. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. I'd driven home, opened a beer, and sent Diana Blackwell a thank you email. Diana, wanted to let you know I've completed my notice at TechCore, and I'm officially starting at Nexus on Monday. Thank you for believing I was worth more than I'd been told. You changed my life. Her response came within an hour. Alex, you changed your own life. I just opened the door. Congratulations, and welcome to the next chapter. That weekend, I'd prepared for my first day at Nexus. New suits, new laptop bag, reviewing the onboarding materials Connor had sent. Amy had taken me out for a celebratory dinner Saturday night. How do you feel? She'd asked over lunch. Terrified, I'd admitted. Excited, vindicated, all of it at once. Michael really got to you, didn't he? She'd said. For a while, yeah. He made me doubt myself. Made me think maybe I was just lucky. Maybe I wasn't as good as I thought. That's what people like him do. They find your insecurities and exploit them. And now I know what I'm worth. Not just in salary terms, though. I know what I can accomplish when I'm not being actively undermined. I'm about to find out if I can perform at VP level. And honestly, even if I struggle, even if it's harder than I expect, at least I'll be failing upward instead of being held back. My first day at Nexus was everything I'd hoped for, and nothing like TechCore. Connor had met me in the lobby at 8 a.m. with coffee and a genuine smile. Welcome aboard, he'd said. Ready to build something amazing? The office was open, collaborative, full of energy. Engineers were working intensely but seemed happy. No one looked beaten down or afraid. Connor had introduced me to the team, 20 engineers, all sharp, all engaged. This is Alex Reeves, your new VP of engineering, he'd announced. He's going to help us scale from 20 to 200 while maintaining the quality and culture that got us here. He's brilliant, he's experienced, and I've given him full authority to make this happen. Welcome him, learn from him, and help him succeed. The engineers had applauded. Actually applauded. One of them, a senior engineer named Rachel Kim, had come up afterward. I looked you up after we heard you were joining. The healthcare authentication system you built, that's textbook good engineering. I'm excited to learn from you. I'd spent the first week in meetings, learning the code base, understanding the architecture, meeting with every engineer individually to understand their strengths and concerns. It was intense, but it was collaborative. When I'd suggested architectural changes, people had engaged with the ideas, pushed back thoughtfully, improved on them. It was everything engineering should be. Connor had checked in with me Friday afternoon of my first week. How's it going? Overwhelming? Challenging, I'd said. But good challenging. Your team is exceptional. The code base is solid. We've got scaling issues to solve, but that's expected at this stage. Any regrets about leaving TechCore? He'd asked with a knowing smile. Not even for a second, I'd said honestly. 3 months into my role at Nexus, I'd hired 30 new engineers, restructured the team into focused pods, and implemented new architectural patterns that reduced deployment time by 60%. We'd shipped 2 major features that had landed significant new enterprise clients. The board was thrilled. Connor had given me a glowing review. Then one afternoon in June, I'd gotten a LinkedIn message from Jason, my former colleague at TechCore. Hey Alex, Wanted to give you a heads up. Things have imploded here since you left. Michael has lost 4 more senior engineers in 3 months. The replacement project you worked on has been a disaster. The new guy can't figure out your architecture, and the client is furious. David finally started asking questions about Michael's management. There's an internal investigation happening. I'm updating my resume. Any chance Nexus is hiring back-end engineers? I'd smiled reading that. Not schadenfreude exactly. Just confirmation that the problems had never been me. Send me your resume, I'd written back. We're always looking for good engineers. Jason had interviewed 2 weeks later. I'd personally recommended him after seeing his technical skills. He'd gotten an offer for $140,000, a 40% increase from what TechCore had been paying him. He'd accepted immediately. I can't believe how different this feels, he'd said after his first week. People actually collaborate here. No one's trying to take credit for your work or undermine you politically. Is this what normal companies are like? This is what good companies are like, I'd said. TechCore isn't normal. Michael made it toxic. In August, I'd gotten an email from an address I didn't recognize at first. The subject line was professional apology. I'd opened it cautiously. Alex, this is David Granger from TechCore. I wanted to reach out personally to apologize for how we handled your situation. After you left, we conducted an internal review of Michael Drucker's management practices. We found a clear pattern of toxic behavior, undermining talented employees, and taking credit for their work. Multiple engineers confirmed similar experiences to what you described. We should have addressed this years ago, and we failed you and other employees. I wanted you to know that Michael is no longer with TechCore as of last week. We've promoted a new VP of engineering from within, someone with a much healthier approach to management. We're also implementing new oversight and feedback mechanisms to prevent this from happening again. I know this doesn't undo the damage, but I wanted you to know we took your concerns seriously, even if it took us too long to act. If you're ever interested in returning to TechCore, we'd welcome the conversation. I understand if you're not. Best regards, David Granger. I'd read that email 3 times. Then I'd forwarded it to Amy with the subject line, vindication. Her response, I'm proud of you for leaving, not for them for finally figuring it out. You deserved better than an apology 2 years too late. She was right. The apology felt hollow. But Michael being fired felt like justice. 6 months into my role at Nexus, we'd grown the engineering team to 85 people. The company had closed a Series E funding round at a $2.8 billion valuation, which meant my equity package was now worth closer to $4 million on paper. We'd launched 3 major product updates that had been covered in TechCrunch and other industry publications. I'd been invited to speak at conferences again, and this time, when I accepted, Connor had encouraged it enthusiastically. The more visibility you get, the more visibility Nexus gets, he'd said. Talk about your work. Take credit for what you've built. Help other engineers learn. That's how we build a reputation as a place where talented people can thrive. 1 year after leaving TechCore, I'd run into Michael Drucker at a tech conference in San Francisco. I'd been speaking on a panel about scaling engineering organizations, and he'd been in the audience. Afterward, as I'd been networking, he'd approached me. Alex, he'd said, and I'd noticed he looked older, more tired. I saw your talk. It was good. Really good. Thank you, I'd said neutrally. I heard you left TechCore, I'd added. Yeah, he'd said, not meeting my eyes. Things didn't work out. I'm consulting now, trying to figure out my next move. I'm sorry to hear that, I'd said, and I'd meant it. I wasn't glad he was struggling. I just didn't care anymore. Look, I owe you an apology, Michael had said. The way I treated you was wrong. I was threatened by your talent, and I handled it poorly. I've had a lot of time to think about my management approach, and I was toxic. I'm sorry. I'd looked at him for a long moment. A year ago, this apology would have meant everything. Now, it felt empty. I appreciate you saying that, I'd said finally. I hope you figure things out, Michael. I really do. But that apology needed to happen 3 years ago when you started undermining me, not now after you've faced consequences. I know, he'd said quietly. For what it's worth, you were the best engineer I ever managed. I should have supported you instead of holding you back. Yeah, I'd agreed. You should have. I'd walked away from that conversation feeling nothing. No anger, no vindication, just relief that it was over. Michael Drucker no longer had any power over me or my career. He was just a guy who'd made bad choices and was living with the consequences. 2 years after leaving TechCore, Nexus Technologies had gone public. The IPO had valued the company at $6.2 billion. My equity package, which I'd been vesting over 4 years, was now worth approximately $8.7 million. I'd sold some shares to buy a house, kept the rest invested. Amy and I had gotten engaged. Life was good. Better than good. I'd built an engineering organization of 180 people across 4 offices. We'd shipped products that served millions of users. I'd mentored dozens of engineers, several of whom had been promoted to senior leadership roles. I'd proven to myself that I wasn't mediocre, wasn't lucky, wasn't any of the things Michael had tried to make me believe. I'd run into Sophie, my former mentee from TechCore, at a conference that year. She'd gotten hired at Google and was working on their cloud infrastructure team. You changed my life, she'd told me. When you left TechCore, it made me realize I didn't have to accept being treated badly. I started looking for opportunities where my work would be valued. Google hired me 6 months after you left, and I've been promoted twice. None of that would have happened if I hadn't watched you stand up for yourself. You did that yourself, I said. I just left. You're the one who put in the work to get hired at Google. You showed me it was possible, she'd insisted. That's worth everything. Looking back now, 3 years after that quarterly review meeting where Michael had called me mediocre, I understood something important. His words had been designed to keep me small, to make me doubt myself, to ensure I never realized I deserved more. And they'd almost worked. If the Nexus offer hadn't come when it did, I might have stayed at TechCore for years, letting Michael slowly erode my confidence until I believed his version of reality. But I'd gotten lucky. Not lucky in the way Michael meant, lucky to be kept around. Lucky that Diana Blackwell had reached out at exactly the right moment. Lucky that I'd had enough self-worth left to take the call, to interview, to bet on myself when it mattered. The real victory wasn't that Michael got fired or that I got rich off the Nexus IPO. The real victory was that I'd stopped letting someone else define my worth. I'd walked away from toxicity toward opportunity. I'd proven that the person holding me back was never me. It was someone who needed me to stay small so they could feel big. Michael was wrong about everything. Other companies would hire me. Did hire me. Not just hire me. Gave me equity worth millions. Gave me leadership opportunities. Gave me respect and autonomy and trust. Every single thing he'd said in that performance review had been a lie designed to protect his ego. And I'd shown everyone, that talent finds its level when you stop letting mediocre managers convince you to aim low. Thanks for watching till the end. Make sure to subscribe and like to not miss the next story.